welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about Really Good Actually by Monica Hiessey. At least I think it's Hiessey, I'm not really sure. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. I have made no notes going into this video. I'm just going to kind of talk about it and see if I form an opinion by the end of the video because I'm feeling a little bit mixed about this one. This book is about a character called Maggie who is 29 and she's going through a divorce after being married for only 1 year. The book kind of kicks off with her saying that she's divorced and listing a multitude of reasons why she might be divorced. It opens like this and it kind of goes on like this for 2.5 pages. She says, "My marriage ended because I was cruel, or because I ate in bed, or because he liked electronic music and difficult films about men and nature, or because I did not, or because I was anxious and this made me controlling, or because red wine makes me critical." And yeah, she just says or, and presents a lot of facts about her and her husband and their relationship. And as you can see from like the tone of this story, it's written in quite a humorous way. It's very much of a inner monologue, Bridget Jones's Diary kind of book. All of the cover quotes on this book kind of say, wildly funny, almost alarmingly relatable, hilarious and profound, the funniest book I've read in a long time. So needless to say, humour is a huge part of how this story is told. And the humour is pretty much just this witty inner dialogue. I've seen some of the reviews on Storygraph saying this is very millennial humour, and I would agree, I think it is. I am a millennial, so it did kind of speak to my sense of humour, like I got all of the references. At no point was I like, like laughing out loud, maybe just because my humour is like broken beyond repair because of the internet. But I think this millennial style humour, it does put it in a specific kind of reader bracket. I think Gen Z and the younger generation, if you're like 23 and below, you might roll your eyes and be like, oh god, this is so millennial, what's she gonna do next? Go to Disneyland and like talk about being a Ravenclaw? And if you're older, say like 50, 60 years old, this might just come across as very young and like you might just roll your eyes at the humour, you might not get it. I don't think it's that difficult to get, but you might just like not find it that relatable because it is just very millennial. And that's for better or worse. I think it does give it a very contemporary feel, but I think in a few years' time, you know, it's going to start to feel dated. I think really only a specific kind of person, a millennial, a specific kind of millennial even, would find this book actually relatable. So we pick up, she's just decided to separate from her husband and she kind of reflects on that conversation that they had where they decided to separate and go their separate ways. She kind of suggested it and he didn't fight for her, didn't disagree, and just kind of moved out with their cat. And not long after this, after she like actually files for divorce, she realizes that you actually can't get divorced that quickly. You have to file for separation and then it takes a whole year for the divorce to actually go through. This is set in Canada, so I don't know what the law is like everywhere else. I've never been through a divorce myself, but this appears to be the law in Canada, in Toronto, where she's based. And this book, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, it covers the events of that whole year where they initially break up and all the way through to the divorce being finalised on the kind of year anniversary of their separation. So Maggie is in a very bad place. This title of Being Really Good Actually is showing like her denial. She's depressed and she's like despondent about what has happened, and she's kind of telling everyone around her that she's fine, really good actually, when it's very obvious to the reader and everyone around her that she's not fine and she's going through a very bad time. She muses a lot about her ex-husband and what he did wrong. They are at the beginning trying to have an amicable breakup, at least she thinks she is, but after he moves out, he just cuts all contact with her. She calls him and emails him, tries to like organise things about the divorce, tries to get some like shared custody for their cat, which isn't that realistic. I think the cat is better off with him. He's got the money, he's got a stable home. She is like pretty poor. She ends up having to move out of her flat that they shared together and like just doesn't really have a stable life, so the cat is better off without her. But it is, needless to say, very sad and very difficult for her to come to terms with, especially when their agreement was that they would try to share custody or that maybe she could see the cat. When he doesn't respond to any of her attempted correspondence or checking in and being like, how are you doing, she goes a little bit ballistic. It isn't clear at first just how ballistic she goes, but later on in the novel we realise that actually she has been calling, leaving voicemails, emailing, texting pretty incessantly, almost to a degree of like a stalker level, even though she's not literally physically stalking him. She is definitely harassing him. He has not responded once. Honestly, he could probably have gone to the police about her, the way she is behaving. And therein lies one of the issues with Maggie. So Maggie is an unreliable narrator. It's very unclear why their marriage has gone as sour as it has. And you don't really get any clear answers to that in this novel, which I kind of thought you would. You don't get any real objective look at their marriage, maybe some passing thoughts of that she's having about the marriage. But the way she acts in this book, obviously she is in a very depressed and bad place, but she's not a good person. She does a lot of questionable things. She's a bad friend. She does a lot of things that lack ethics, shall we say. And this does make you question, like, what role did she really have in the downfall of this marriage, and how is she to blame? Because one of the main issues with Maggie is that she rarely takes accountability for herself. She seems to not be able to be that objective about herself and her own behaviour. There's a chapter later in the book where she goes to therapy, and she's hoping that John, her ex-partner, will come to the therapy session as well, even though she's had no confirmation from him about this, and this is about 9 months into their separation. And she's never been to therapy herself, and the therapist is kind of questioning her on this, and she says, well, I wanted to try it and go with John while we were together, because I think he's got a lot of issues that he needs to figure out. He's got anger issues, he does this and that, and she kind of speaks about this therapy session about she wants to get there early because she wants to like ingratiate herself with the therapist so that the therapist will take her side when they start getting into unpacking the breakup and unpacking the marriage. She fully views John as this person that had all of the issues and her as being like pretty blameless, and she has no clear idea of what's gone on. She's very confused and like out of touch with the reality of it. And in actual fact, very obviously, as she talks to this therapist, she displays a wealth of her own issues that probably contributed to the downside of this marriage. And this is certainly something that was quite interesting, but it wasn't something that I thought I was going to get going into the novel, because reading the back, it says in the second paragraph, as she throws herself headlong into the chaos of her first year of divorce, she finds herself questioning everything, including why do we still get married? Did I fail before I even got started? And how many 4 a.m. delivery burgers do I need until I can be happy? So I thought it was going to go into more philosophical questions about marriage and how the concept might be flawed in some way, almost a philosophical examination, but through the lens of like a quirky, funny character that's going through it at a young age. However, Maggie is such an unreliable narrator. She makes so many bad choices. She's not really the person to answer any of these questions properly in any shape or form. If anything, I think the answer to these questions, at least in Maggie's specific case, and probably many other people's case, is that they are not self-aware, and they have a lot of issues that they need to work out, that they don't take responsibility for. They don't think things through properly. They get married or have kids or get the job they think they're supposed to get just because that's the order of events, that's what you're supposed to do in life, without really thinking about what they want and what is right for them and if this partner is right for them. I do appreciate that Maggie is quite a mentally ill person that has been triggered by the events of the divorce and whatnot, but I think she is still to blame, and we can still hold her accountable for where she is and how she's got herself in this position. And I'm not trying to victim blame either, like I think John deserves equal accountability in that. But I really think the book does fail to answer these questions, not the burger question, but the other two questions about the point of marriage, why do we still get married, and you know, this high divorce rate. They kind of mention a 49% divorce rate in the book, why that's so high, how this happens. I don't think the book answers that apart from by saying like, well, Maggie's kind of a bad person, and I don't really think that's a satisfactory answer for me. Maggie is kind of an academic person. She's doing a PhD and she works as a research assistant, works at uni, like teaching students, tutoring students, that kind of thing. She is a smart person and she does have the ability to like think critically about stuff, but she just has this like wild blind spot when it comes to herself and her own behaviour. She's wildly immature in a number of ways, and as well as lacking self-awareness, she also lacks a lot of self-esteem. She thinks very critically about herself, her body in particular, and there's a lot of like mention of eating disorder, or an old eating disorder that she had, and her thoughts around food and her thoughts around her body image now as well. That might be quite triggering to someone that has those kind of feelings. Maybe don't read this book. She's also someone that's quite liberal and left-wing. She thinks a lot about like the issues, the environment, things like this. She's got opinions, and she's got like the strong opinion that things need to change, but she doesn't actually do anything to help. She strikes me as like one of these people that just post things on their Instagram story while never doing any charity work, any self-work, anything actually helpful for society, or try to solve these problems herself. She kind of just wants to berate other people for not doing things. This is evident in a chapter where she's with her father and she sees an article in a newspaper about McDonald's workers who want to raise their minimum wage to $15, and she points this out to her father, thinking that he's going to be, well, that's ridiculous, and then she can have a fight with him, and she's literally like gearing up to have a fight with him, and he looks at it, he kind of tuts, and she's like, oh, yes, rolling up her sleeves, like, here we go. And then he's like, well, $15 really isn't enough in this climate, like they actually need more. And she's shocked that he is on the same side as her and just doesn't know what to do. Like, she was gearing up for this fight that she now can't have. She tries it a few times with him, and he's just kind of like, I agree with that. And that's one of the things I really disliked about her. She's judging other people, and she takes pleasure in being self-righteous and telling other people that they're wrong, without ever admitting that she's wrong and that she could be doing more, and that like she is the problem. And I feel like this is almost the case with her when it comes to like marriage and the culture of marriage and getting married young. I feel like she is the kind of person who will blame marriage as a whole because it didn't work for her, and she's then very skeptical of other people getting married, skeptical of other people's relationships. And actually, the problem was with her and her own marriage. It's not to do with anyone else. She's one of those people that really needs to just take a look at herself and like make her own bed before she tries to fix the world or fix marriage. It actually makes me feel a little bit sorry for people that are reading this book and saying, oh, that's so relatable, because I'm like, I hope you can't relate to that. I hope you actually maybe learn from what Maggie's like and maybe make some changes yourself. I think that might help you in the long run. Again, I don't really want to sound like too much like Jordan Peterson in saying this, but maybe look at like your circle of control and your circle of influence and the circle of things you can't control, which would be the concept of marriage and like the whole world and what they do. Maybe focus on yourself and your own behaviour and the things that you can do, and maybe you can influence some things as well within like these larger topics. But first you've really got to go to that like inner circle, which is yourself and your living situation and your spending habits and your health and your self-esteem and everything. Read a philosophy book. The unexamined life is not worth living. Examine your life. The best thing Maggie could do to make the world a better place would be to make herself a bit better so that she's not being an absolute menace to society, because she's an absolute menace to the people she goes on to date on these apps, date and text and ghost, and she's a menace to Maris. Maris deserved better, justice for Maris. Amy and her friends deserve better, and like maybe John deserved better, we don't know. I think that's one of the things that's really interesting, is that she's musing a lot about her relationship, but we are like without the context. We don't really know a lot about the relationship. For all I know, he could have been abusive. She does say that he has anger issues. Maybe her mental state and her subsequent depression could be the result of being in an abusive relationship. Again, we don't know. Or he could have been fine and she could have been a nightmare. It's very hard to know that as a reader, and she's very unreliable and biased. Whereas in another book where you read from someone's perspective, you naturally want to take the protagonist's side a little bit. But Maggie really lost me. I think I started with like good faith with her, of giving her a chance and being like, yeah, this really sucks. Like, we've all been through breakups. It is sad, like it's heart-wrenching, especially a divorce at this age. I can totally relate to and understand why that would be really difficult. Losing your cat, that's what I can empathise with the most. That's horrible. But she really lost me throughout the course of the book, and I really stopped empathising with her at a certain point. Maybe with a bit more context of the relationship, I would feel a bit more empathy with her. Maybe if we discovered more about the relationship throughout the novel, that would have been better, and it would have got me back on her side when she lost me. But that kind of didn't happen, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not sure if that was like what Monica Hiessey was going for. Like, maybe the author's aim was for us to dislike her main character and not actually find her that relatable or find that much empathy. Maybe she's a bit more like June from Yellowface, where you're kind of in this person's head and they're not a good person. That's kind of how I felt reading it. but it's not what I expected going into the book, and I'm not sure if that was like intentional or not. Maybe my lack of connection to this book is that I'm just not in that kind of headspace that she's in. I'm not going through a breakup, I'm not disillusioned with relationships or marriage the way that she is, and I feel like I'm in like quite a healthy space. Like I'm doing quite well, I'm working hard, I'm working on myself, I'm working on my self-esteem. So like I don't currently find it relatable. Maybe if I read this like when I had depression, maybe I would find it more relatable, or if I was going through a divorce or going through a breakup, like possibly I would find comfort or relatability in this book. But I would want to read this book and receive the message that like I shouldn't be this way and that I should actually try to handle things a bit better than Maggie does. Maybe it could be like a cautionary tale about accidentally stalking your ex or being a good friend and like getting good mental health support, and not like disdaining the idea of therapy or thinking you don't need it when clearly you like do, and that would be the perfect time for anyone, whether they have a mental illness or not, to get some therapy and get some help. If this book holds a mirror up to people and says don't be like Maggie, I think that's a great book. But if people are reading it and going, oh, I also maxed out my credit cards and I bought delivery burgers at 4 a.m. every night for 2 months, and haha, isn't it so funny? Aren't I such a hot mess? And I don't think that's so great. I don't think that's so helpful. But like, all of this to say, going through a breakup like this is horrible. It's heart-wrenching, and I'm like, I do empathise with the situation. I think going through a divorce at 29 and then feeling this sense that like I was really in love and it was a really healthy relationship for 10 years. I kind of doubt that given how it ended up. I think it probably went south. Easily should have probably went south like 2 years before they got married. Don't know that because I don't know the context. But like I can totally buy that in the beginning, for the first 4 or 5 years of their relationship, they were super in love and it was healthy, and you know, there wasn't any major issues. When a relationship like that seems like healthy and fine falls apart, and your whole idea for your future falls apart, you think this is my person, I'm going to be with them forever or until one of us dies, and then you get divorced only a year later. What that is a complete obliteration of your life. Hank Green once did a video, it was called The Obliteration of Expectation, and this is what this kind of life event is like. This obliteration of expectation is when you have just an idea that you kind of take for granted that your future is going to look like. So, you know, I assume that like tomorrow I'm going to go to work, and every day this week I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to live kind of a normal life. But let's say I go outside and I break my ankle and I'm unable to work or even weight bear for 6 weeks. I know what this is like because it's happened, and it was quite heart-wrenching in that moment. I just landed my dream job, it was a practical job, and I then had to be off for like 2 months. And I just remember being drunk and being like, I'm so disappointed, because what I had thought my life would be for the next, you know, day, week, month was just completely now not that. And on a bigger scale, you go through this if you get a diagnosis, of cancer, if one of your loved ones dies, if you're suddenly like faced with the idea that you might not actually just live to 80 and die happily in your bed, you might actually, you know, now you've got a diagnosis and this is what the end of your life looks like. Or that partner that you thought you were going to be with until your 80s, you're now divorced or they passed away, and you might be like 40 and now you're like, shit, I found the one, I thought that this was a problem that was solved, and now I have to find another one. And in the case of divorce, you're like, how do I know I can make this work after I thought everything was working and I was wrong? How do you trust yourself again after that? That is very, very difficult. And if the book had been a little bit more about that and that obliteration of expectation, I think I would have really enjoyed it and rated it a lot more highly. I hope that Maggie gets this space in the grieving process where she starts to like deal with these questions, deal with this grief that comes with this obliteration of expectations. I think it would have been interesting to read about that if she'd got to that place over the course of this book. But all we really got of Maggie was this really messy stage, and I know that this messy stage can go on for like a year or two, and that maybe this is a natural part of this process. I think it's probably good that it's not glamorized and that she does show that she's a mess. I think it can destigmatize mental illness and destigmatize this period in your life where you might be a bit of a mess and you might be in credit card debt and you might be just being an absolute garbage person. But I would have liked this book to be a bit of a roadmap of how someone comes from this horrible space and deals with this horrible thing and comes out of the other side actually really good. And I just don't think that we got that. So let's get into like a little bit more spoilers about the end and what actually happened. So Maggie continues to be this kind of hot mess for like 3/4 of the book, and personally I think a lot of that could have been cut. I really got kind of like just down, like the humour wasn't doing it for me. I was like depressed reading this and like not really having a good time, kind of like just wanted it done, honestly. And then around the 3/4 mark she kind of peaks in her awfulness, and poor Maris like pretty much breaks or like bruises her hip as a result because she's chasing her while she's drunk and like running away. She also has this disastrous therapy session where they call John and he's like, stop calling me, and like this is not happening and we're not getting back together, and she's kind of wanting to get back together, and it's a little bit sad. And then she starts therapy after this. She kind of almost tricks herself into going to therapy, honestly. So yeah, 3/4 mark she hits rock bottom, and there's like a big obvious consequence, and you know, she can't be in denial about John and the relationship anymore because she kind of gets answers that like, we are never getting back together, like ever. And she really alienates all her friends at this time as well. So after this bit of a wake-up call, she kind of picks herself back up. She decides to help Maris take her to physiotherapy. She decides to like look for a new research assistant for her and move out of her house. She sends like gifts to Amy to try and make up their friendship, and starts to like try to mend some of the friendships a little bit. She moves home with her dad, she starts exercising a bit, she goes to regular therapy, and she starts volunteering at the cat shelter. And then at some point during this time she does see John and the cat on the bus. Don't know where he was taking the cat. Yeah, I want to know if Janet the cat is okay. And she sees him and she doesn't talk to him, and she just gets off the bus, and then they see each other and they just kind of look at each other, and that shows a little bit of growth because she doesn't try to talk to him, she doesn't hound him, and she doesn't hound him after that. She has a bit of a dinner party with her friends. She moves in with Amy after like making up to her. She does this kind of grand gesture thing at the exercise bike place, the spin class, and then they make up, and her friends and her make up, and then the divorce goes through, and she's just like, cool. And then the book ends. She didn't magically fix all of her problems. She still felt pretty depressed and pretty bad. She was still doing things where like she was kind of a bit of a shitty person, but she was starting to make progress, and I think by the end of the book you see that like, yeah, she's not there yet, but she will get there sometime. And that's fine, but I just think I would have liked a little bit more from it. I think her emotional journey could have been paced a little bit better. I feel like this rock bottom could have happened actually at the midpoint, maybe around Christmas time, New Year's time, and then we could have got more of a climb out of the kind of the depths of her psyche. Maybe we could have seen her like actually learn her lesson a bit more, which I would have liked. I don't feel like she was all the way there and all the way taking accountability yet. I think it would have been nice to see her come out on the other side and have a bit more of a positive transformation, and then maybe she could have actually tackled some of these questions about, you know, the state of marriage in the modern day and what the issues are with marriage, or what the issue is with getting married young, why sometimes marriages can break up, and especially after such a short amount of time. I wish she'd come to some conclusions about why she thought that her marriage had actually ended, because we've, you know, got these opening pages of my marriage ended because of this or this or this, and I guess that shows that like it wasn't one thing, it was a lot of little things. But what is the theme in a lot of these little things, and could she have found some pattern and some theme that would have helped her make sense of it, and then would have helped us make sense of it, and maybe that lesson would have been helpful to us, like approaching marriage, or if we'd been through a divorce young or something like that. Instead we don't really get any of that. And I get that that's like maybe realistic, and maybe she's going for realism because, you know, it doesn't take a year to get over a marriage breaking up. It can take many, many years. And it's probably unrealistic to expect her to go through all of these stages of grief in just 1 year. But I think for a book and for a narrative structure, I think that would have been very useful for us as readers. Other than that, with the pacing, I think the book was well written. I think the humour was witty and stuff like that. Not too mad at it. So I think Monica's done like a fairly good job. I didn't have any issues with the writing, just with the emotional journey of the character and the pacing of it. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think a lot of people did really like this book and a lot of people hated it. It was quite a polarising book. I think it was like 3.5, 3.75 stars. But you can let me know your thoughts in the comments. If If you enjoyed my review, subscribe. I have new reviews or writing videos every Tuesday, and I hope you're having a very lovely day, and I hope that you're not going through a crazy divorce and crisis like Maggie is. Thanks for watching. Bye!